Hello everyone. Today is Wellness Wednesday and I am redoing my nails and I actually need to start the process all over again because I messed up my nails while doing them. That's the problem with multitasking. So today on this Wellness Wednesday, I'm going to talk about just one quick thing, and that is the mental load of being enough. The mental load of being enough. So as I mentioned, I'm a millennial. So I grew up watching women doing so much. I watched men do things, and how they showed up. But I watched and also inherited certain rules and responsibilities, not only as an adult, but just as a human being, right? There's certain things that you have to do to keep your days going. And this is me, so you see that I'm here. But I want to turn the screen just a little bit, because as I told you, I started doing my nails at home when, after a few years of living however you want to, you determine that what are your most pressing expenses versus your priorities. What do you want to accomplish with your money? Where's your money going? And what are the trade-offs that you can make in order to help you achieve your goal faster? And so for me, some of those things that I was willing to put to the side just as an adult was the frequency with which I was going to coffee shops and buying beverages versus what I was creating at home. And then also like my manis, pedis, facials, other like wellness steams like for women. What else have I started doing at home? Making my own like reed diffusers, as well as my body care, my hair care. Like I still buy certain things, but I wanted to rein in my spending. And I say that to say, because growing up, I watched the women look their best with where they were. And that looked very different for everyone, I do not remember there being this sea of supplements that we see now. Definitely not as many brands and marketing and advertisements as we see now. And I realized how susceptible I was to marketing, working in the industry, and how I love circulating money through the economy. But after a while, when it was like, okay, if you have this resource and you have trade-offs that you need to do, how can you make this work for you? So when it comes to wellness, again, I grew up watching women look their best, right? They obviously spent money. They went to the department stores. They got their perfume. They had their makeup. They had their hair done, their nails done. Some people did it at home. Like just the family that I grew up in, we had lots of entrepreneurs. So like there were hairdressers that were friends of the family. So like the women, they would go and get their hair done by people that they actually knew. And that type of world no longer exists, right? Like when I came back to the area, I saw just how much things have changed, right? You have no shortage of brands you can support. You have no shortage of hairstylists to go to, things of that nature. And as a result, like you're dealing with all these different people's preferences. And I noticed that just, again, even when it comes down to the quality of certain foods and things of that nature, like just there's way too many things on the market where like I needed to be discerning about not only what I'm putting into my body, but who I'm supporting. after time, you realize just how much money you are able to generate, how much money you're able to circulate, and the finite resource that you have is your time. So it began to boil down to how much time do I really want to spend on this versus if I can outsource it and pay somebody else to do said thing for me. And so, again, with how my life is set up, I'm a plant mom, so I have at least 29 plants around the house. I have a binder that keeps my schedule and the different things that have to go on around the house. So I have a pretty busy life, right? And when it comes to wellness, I was looking at, okay, when I go get my panel test, what levels are off? Okay, what do I need to supplement, things of that nature? And I realized how it's not advantageous for me to be as empowered in knowing what I actually need, because that means that I need less, right? If I eat my fruits and vegetables, if I eat my whole grains, if I pick better qualities of meat, if I care about who was raising the meat before it was slaughtered, if I know the backstory of the company that's providing the water, things of that nature, I'm going to care a little bit more and I'm going to spend a little bit more money on it. So for my wellness life, it is very custom tailored to where I am at this stage of my life after watching so many different things happen, watching the quality of the nutrients of the fruits and vegetables that are available in the market, things of that nature. And again, that's why I care so much about ecology and then also regenerative agriculture, because after a while, like, the soil has minerals and nutrients that then go into our food, but we also have to do our part to put it back into the soil. So some farmers are incentivized to be a little bit more forward thinking. Some farmers are incentivized to just produce in surplus. And I'm not saying that either is right or either is wrong. It's just that each person, when it comes down to voting with your dollars, you have to determine what's best for you. So here is my coffee that I make at home, and I use my little AeroPress. I would go get it, but I'm sitting down and I don't feel like getting up. Actually, I'll do it. I'll show you. Since we're talking about wellness, I'll bring a few things. So here's my AeroPress. So basically, it's a filtration system. You open it up, you put a little circular filter disc on it, you put your scoops of coffee. I also made a custom spice blend. I won't tell you what it is because I had fun creating it just for my taste. But once the water, you put some water in a kettle on the stove, you let it boil, and then you pour it in, stir it up, and then press it down, and it's placed over your cup. So every day, since it's just me, I'm the only one that drinks coffee. So put it over there and then press it down, and I have my cup of coffee. And I love it. It tastes so rich. I put my creamer in it. Delicious. I don't drink coffee every day anymore, since I no longer am working like a traditional 9 to 5. I don't have as much anxiety as I used to have. I don't have that same like hurry up and hustle. Like, that was really throwing my body off. I still get things accomplished, but not in the same way that I was forced to produce under when I was working for other people. I think I was more apt to do that in my younger years, but now that I'm getting older, and like I said, I've seen the effects that it's had on my body, it's not worth it to me anymore. Second up, I mentioned that in addition to like making my own hair care products, like I'm just in a season of like exploring with herbs, vitamins, minerals, things of that nature. And again, This is not health advice, so I'm not telling you to go out and follow what I am doing. Every person's body is different. I'm speaking from my perspective only. I bought some moringa powder because I also use it in my hair oil, but you can also make it as a tea. So on normal days, like I said, I don't drink coffee every day anymore, but I'll have moringa tea. I'll add this to some boiling water, a little bit of sweetener, and I'll drink it throughout the day. One of the things that I added into my diet when I took out sugar was monk fruit sweetener, because it has 0 net carbs, it's 0 glycemic, it's keto friendly, and it's about a 1-to-1 sugar replacement. It doesn't have any calories. So monk fruit is a wonderful fruit that you can eat as well. But again, just when you start looking at some of the wellness products that are created, you'll start to see some alternatives that come on the market that try to help with getting your body and your taste buds acclimated to an alternative. So you'll see sometimes it's a different fruit, but you'll see how you'll see like jackfruit tacos or other ways that they'll use like jackfruit to make it like a meat alternative for people that are either plant-based, vegan, or trying to transition. Like I said, I'm a flexitarian, meaning I do everything in moderation. Everybody has to figure out what works for themselves. There were years where I was a pescatarian. There were years that I was vegan or vegetarian. But again, with how my body is, everything in moderation, increase more water, making sure that I also ingest salt. Because I think when you are trying to give your body the best that you can sometimes go to extremes, not realizing that your body needs all of certain minerals and elements. And so to completely starve yourself of certain things can throw your body out of whack. You can cause more harm than good without even knowing it. So that's why I said, like, for me, even though I am practicing herbalism and learning more about herbalism, I still have doctors who understand both conventional medicine as well as holistic medicine, so that we can have like holistic conversations. And one of the things that I appreciate most about my primary care physician is that she is not the type that will just blanketly prescribe you with medicine just because something's going on, right? For instance, there are times where, again, just with all the amounts of added sugars, especially as a woman, it can really lead to candida overgrowth. It can cause all sorts of gut imbalances. It can also cause infections or just yeast overgrowth in your mouth, in your ears, and then also in your nether regions. And so, again, that's why I said, like, as women, we have to find a way to get over our differences so that we can actually have these conversations about like how our bodies are impacted by the things that we put into our mouths. And so when I was drinking coffee every day, eating lots of breads, things of that, lots of starchy foods, I'd be like, something's going on. Like, let me go to the doctor. And I would sit with her and I'd be like, I don't know what's going on. And she'd be like, okay, let's talk about what you've been eating. What have you been doing? Things of that nature. How's your system? Blah, blah, blah. And oftentimes we would just need to do an elimination diet for my body to go back into normal functioning. And by working with her, and again, she's a Black woman, but by working with her, I was able to learn as I grew into what works for Nicole's body. And so, like I said, like just with where I am now, these are years of learning and unlearning what works for me. So by the time I get to drinking teas, swapping out alternatives, it's because I've already worked with practitioners to figure out how to detox my system so that it can recalibrate and come back stronger. As I mentioned, I do intermittent fasting. It was recommended to me to do it every time the season changes, just so your body, your body has a chance to get back on its natural rhythm and get some of those impurities out. I have also, again, just really focused on not eating so heavily throughout the day. So for instance, if I have a really large meal, the other meals will be smaller, if that makes sense. If I have a nice, delicious piece of steak, I won't have meat with my other meals, if that makes sense. And because I don't believe in demonizing potatoes or French fries, I still do enjoy potatoes and sweet potatoes. It's just a matter of how they're prepared, right? So for instance, if I want French fries, sometimes I'll cut them myself, or sometimes I'll just have like store-bought, but I won't eat them all the time throughout the week. And I think what I know about just staying within a tolerable level of, I love my body, I love myself. I don't want to feel like I am not able to enjoy delicious foods that are available to me as a human. You do have to have a balance. To me, it's not about discipline. It's about saying it's okay for you to eat what you want, right? I think when I look at the world, like I'd really try my best to not be judgmental, because you never know what people are going through. And especially as you learn more about trauma and how the body stores trauma, people can be carrying weight from things that like have nothing to do with food, but it could be stuff that they had to go through in their human journey, and that's just this is their body's way of protecting them, and so that's what's in there. And so I think for a while I was triggered by some of the thinfluencers and health coaches that I would see online, because they have this very authoritarian approach to people, as if they are somehow perfect, as if they are not without their own flaws and their own journey. And it's like, how can you actually coach people and help them understand what options they have available if you actually hate them, right? If you actually are not kind to them, or you're not kind to the human condition. And so again, for me, when I look at how important trauma-informed care is in any practice, that I hold that to a higher standard than, let's say, someone who's walking around with a six-pack. Because again, they could be in the gym 24/7 as a defense mechanism about something else that's going on in their life, right? That could be the only thing that they have going for themselves. And so like they are so vain that that's all they care about is how they look, not how they got there. Like, right, they could be taking all sorts of powders, supplements, things of that nature. And again, nothing wrong with any of that stuff, because I think we've seen it time and time again. You live long enough and you start to watch the trends, right? I remember there were so many different like protein shakes or weight loss shakes. There was Weight Watchers. Again, watching the women and the men in just society go through the trends of the 90s, right? The early 2000s, things of that nature. And you're like, okay, but we also have a lot more prepackaged foods than we did back then, right? We have way more additives in the foodstuffs. And so oftentimes that's why I will call foodstuffs, is because it's not necessarily just the straight up thing that came from the earth, right? It's all these things that were made in a lab that then go into the food that we are then consuming, which could also be what's in our body, because our body doesn't know how to produce it, right? All this filler contents. We don't know. Most of us are not scientists. We just trust these food companies to be giving us healthy foods, we literally don't know what it's doing to our bodies. So again, like growing up, my mom, she cooked mostly every day except for Fridays and Saturdays. Those were our days where we could get takeout. So we either had carry out or pizza. And then Saturday you would have, again, the leftovers, etc. And I used to love it, right? Because again, love food. So it made us appreciate having takeout because we didn't have it all the time. So come Friday, like you were excited because you're like, oh my goodness, I wonder what we're going to get for dinner today. And I vividly remember one memory of like, I was so excited. We were all, again, at my grandmother's house in DC, and we were heading to go get McDonald's for dinner. And I was so excited. I got in the car and I wound up slamming my finger in the car door because I was so excited I wasn't paying attention, and I wound up having to stay home, like, because I was in so much pain. And it was just like, oh, just go in the house, we'll bring back what you want. But I loved the experience of like, oh, it's Friday, we're getting this food, da 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 da. And so again, just all these things of how food has evolved over time, right? Like I remember when Pepsi had their clear Pepsi. I remember when Pepsi had their blue Pepsi, and being like, oh my God, this is cool. And so it's like, it's having this awareness and this recollection that like there's always been food science. There's always been, let's bring this to market. Let's see how this is going to do. Let's see how the customer is going to adapt to it. We don't see those two products that I just mentioned, the Pepsi Clear or the Pepsi Blue. We don't see those anymore, I don't think. Or if they do exist, don't necessarily have them. But as I am now and I see how things are affecting my body, I find myself going back to like just the basics as much as possible of like whole foods, right? And even some ancient grains. So I've also adopted like quinoa into my diet, amaranth, wild rice, black rice, jasmine rice, just again, looking for things that are alternatives and closer to their original form than like over processed, flavorful, fancy things. Again, you can, if you know what you're doing, you can create that same taste with herbs without having to have all those additives. And so, like I said, by the time I started learning how to cook, I've been cooking since I was in my teens because my mom was a single parent. And so my sister and I, we helped out a lot around the house, learning how to clean meat, clean fruits and vegetables, cook, prepare things, all the way up to like large family dinners for like Christmas and Thanksgiving, you name it, I've done it. By the time I became of age and had my own space to host, then it became time for the baton to be passed on to, okay, you all host a holiday, etc., etc. And then it was like, oh my God, you realize how much work it actually takes to, again, decorate the house, clean the house, prepare the meals, host, drinks, clean up, etc. And I was at some point after a few years of doing it, I was like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I loved and appreciated the time to build with family, but it no longer became fun, right? And then again, over time, just some of the heavier dishes that we were accustomed to having, things of that nature, I was gravitating away from it just because I was more health conscious, right? Like I was noticing that I would get sleepy after consuming such like sugar and carb laden foods, and so just all those things that like, just started changing. And so as we know, you can't force anybody to change, right? You can share news, you can share information, but ultimately everybody has the right to live how they want to live, and everybody does. And so after a while, it was just like, I love you guys, like, yes, let's spend time, but just from a personal standpoint of like my mental health and my physical health, I no longer wanted to host in the same way that like I had been raised under. And that had come after like having tofurkey at certain dinners, having vegan macaroni and cheese, like you name it, just trying different ways of being like, technically this is vegan, but I still don't think this is necessarily healthy because all of these are modified ingredients to make it seem like it's cheese, but it's really not cheese. And just being like, you know what? It's probably just better if I have the real thing and have it in moderation than eating this food that's been modified that I technically don't know what it's doing. And so that's a little bit of the reason why, for me, I have come out of feeling like I have to follow someone else's plan for a lifestyle that works, right? Like for some, and again, I'm open and I listen to other people, just hearing their experiences. They're interchangeable things that I have tried and I'll continue to be open to. But when it comes to like fake meats, fake ingredients, things of that nature, I'm not interested. Just because, again, if I can't go pick it off a tree, or if I can't go directly to the farm and say, or the butcher or the meat counter and say, hey, give me your fresh cut of meat or your fresh fish of the day, I'm genuinely not interested in it. So I appreciate the grocery stores and the merchants that I'm able to support. They're a mix of national, international, and local brands because that works for my life, right? Like there are CSAs that if I ate enough and if I had a family that was large, participating in a CSA would make sense, right? But by the time you look at how much a vegetable, like let's say a piece of squash, when you look at how much cutting up a piece of squash actually yields, you realize how abundant it is to like, if you focus on having vegetables and then a piece of protein, whether it's your lentils, your chickpeas, or animal protein, or fish, whatever, you'll see how you can get really full and stay full for longer by having the fiber from a plant protein in addition to your vegetables. So again, I try to balance it out based on years of trial and error with how I have eaten and what actually works for my body. And I know, again, this is something that I usually don't see people talk about it in wellness because, again, just because how I came into wellness was through the fashion, beauty, lifestyle kind of angle. You usually see the hyper glossy, high aesthetic type side of wellness. But another side of wellness is also the elimination process, right? So technically, how often are you eliminating and having waste come out of your body every day? That's also important, right? That tells how healthy your digestive system is, right? How much is it able to actually push through? If you eat too much of heavy things, you don't have enough fiber, you're going to be bloated. You're also going to experience constipation because, again, your body is a very smart system. It knows how to heal itself. It knows how to cleanse itself. And sometimes by adding food in, you're actually overwhelming it. And so, again, that's why I said intermittent fasting is important, but I monitor all of that, right? I monitor how often I'm using the bathroom every day, right? Like just all of those things. And working from home makes it easier to be healthy, right? And I understand that a lot of companies have had these return to office mandates because they want to make sure that they're getting optimal productivity from their workers while they're on the clock, etc. But when I talk to people behind the scenes, work from home has been a godsend for the introverts, for the people who have a lot going on, whether they're caregiving for children or the elderly, and even just being able to take better care of themselves, right? The commute itself can be very draining. So depending how far you would have to commute, you're in all of that energy before you even get to work. So all of that plays a part in it. But being able to like actually provide yourself with healthy, nutritious, home cooked meals before you start your work day, for lunch and for dinner, like it makes a overall difference in a person's well-being. And so when you start talking about employee retention, when you start talking about how employees show up for their colleagues, leadership, as well as the clients that they're serving, all of that matters. And I think it's incredibly short-sighted for so many people to speak out against work from home based on the stories of people who have done extreme circumstances that a company didn't necessarily agree with. And that's why I think it's important for Black women in particular, right? Because I can only speak from the perspective of a Black woman. That's why I think it's important for Black women to like really, really decide their overall wellness journey and where they want to be, like what quality of life they want, because it matters, right? It doesn't, at least for me, it didn't feel good, always having to rely on others to prepare my meals, right? Depending on what job I was at, I would find like a local salad spot, a local breakfast spot that I could rely on, and then I'd look for the local grocery store. But it's like I would always try to do what was best while I was working so that, again, I'm fueled, but I'm not lethargic at work, right? I will also look for a gym, or if the environment that surrounded the job was decent enough, go for a walk, right, with colleagues. Because again, having a walk-in meeting, you get to agreeable terms quicker, just all those little things where it's like you can optimize your life once you're actually in the rhythm. And so again, what works for one person doesn't work for others. So that's why I said, like, just when you look at the wellness industry, don't be so quick to just jump on every bandwagon. I have seen some horrible stories about people landing in the hospital because of some supplements that they've taken, because some influencer recommended it and they bought it off Amazon. What most people don't know is that supplements aren't fully regulated. I know that because one of my former clients was the Council for Responsible Nutrition. And so again, when I tell you all certain things about my lived experience and my professional experience, I move the way that I do because I've seen the actual data. I've worked with the people who are actively making sure that humans can be as safe as possible while still having lots of options within the confines of capitalism, right? Because again, capitalism is still a structure that has rigidity. If we were a total free market, socialism would have taken over by now. You know what I mean? So that's why I said, like, you just have to be very careful. I know that it is glitzy, it's glam, and a lot of times these things are presented to us as an option because it's known that we have insecurities about our body. It's known that we have insecurities about, am I doing enough? Am I enough? Am I enough? And so when I sat down and came up with the strategy to start producing content on social media, to start sharing more of my story, to write my book, I centered it on the self, right? Of saying, you are enough, your cup is full, you give from the overflow. Focus on your breath, because I know what it feels like to work in a very visual industry. Like I said, I've worked behind the scenes in communications, advertising, and marketing. I have 2 degrees. I have a degree in fashion marketing. I have a degree in mass communications with the focus on strategic public relations and advertising. My career has been creating narratives, creating storytelling, really shaping the human experience in a way that encourages people to participate and be lifelong brand ambassadors, be supporters, or just engage with companies, people in some way, shape, or form. Everything from your mom and pop shop to and your single solopreneur, all the way up to your Fortune 100 company. I've had an opportunity to work with some incredible initiatives. And so I see the difference between what the images that we're presented about, this is what it looks like, versus the people that are actually doing the work behind the scenes. And I always laugh because I'm like, everybody is so normal. And again, we get caught up in the fact that like this is a model that we have hired to be a spokesperson. They just naturally look like that with a little bit of makeup and mostly Photoshop, right? Because sometimes they don't even look fully like that. So I think by the time I was done with college, it was very clear on how Photoshop was used to create this image of humans that didn't exist, right? And how you had to be careful about what you ingested and what it reflected about yourself because, again, there are people with all sorts of eating disorders and, again, mental imbalances, and they could be leading the company. They could be the ones who's cutting the checks, and these are who are shaping the minds and hearts of other humans, right? So when you start to say, oh, wow, there's an imperfect person selling me a product, this product may be cool, but I'll just look at it as a product because I don't know anything else other than it's just a product. It kind of takes away some of the mystique about said thing where it's like it's a mix of ingredients that is supposed to do XYZ. Let me see how and what it does. Don't get caught up in who the person is selling things to you. Like if you really are serious about improving your health, there are things that you could do without money, right? And so some of the stuff that I share is because I want people to focus on that, right? Sure, get a personal trainer if you need accountability, right? Get XYZ if you need this. If it's in your budget, get XYZ. But sometimes if you have a piece of scrap paper lying around somewhere, you can use that to write your daily journal for the day, right? But a lot of us don't want to hear that, right? We want what we want when we want it. And that goes for everyone. So when you start talking about egomaniacs who are driven by profit, who need to make their end of the year quota because for whatever their external goal is, then you can see how the care and safety of the customers can, be moved to the side. And now I'm not saying that there are a whole bunch of villains running companies, but I think when you start to look at some of the class action lawsuits, the consumer complaints that come up, you start to see why we ask for accountability and responsible marketing, right? They're so, I know like marketing and advertising gets a bad rap, right? Like there are certain things that I draw the line hard and fast on, including advertising to children. I'm not, the more that I learn and continue my professional development, the less likely I am to have screens in front of my children when they get here. Do you see what I'm saying? Because I cannot ignore all the results that have come out about like what they know that having access to screens does to the brain before children are 7 years old. It actually stunts their growth, right? The more that children are typing on tablets and computers, the less their executive functioning skills are developed, right? So that's why I posted a few weeks ago about the research from the neuroscientists that said keep handwriting, keep the practice of handwriting going, because what it develops in the neurons in the brain is vital to your human existence. We have to be accountable and responsible for ourselves and the children that we birth. We can't assume that, oh, because I work a 9 to 5 job and I'm putting my child in this school, or I'm paying X number of dollars for said school, that those people are going to put the care into your children the way that you can as a parent, right? So I'm completely on board with the trend of homeschooling, right? I think it's very important. When you start to see just how powerful the mind is, you will be less apt to just allow anyone into it. We are on the tail end of that because as adults, the damage has been done. What's been done to us by the boomers who made it okay for certain things to fly, it's up to us to find the balance for ourselves and just kind of, find ways to heal and like reverse some of the some of the things we normalized, you know, like I say all the time, what one person eats doesn't make me poop, and what I eat doesn't make somebody else poop. So I'm focused on what I'm ingesting, and I'm, you know, sharing with my community just my perspective and the angle that I'm coming at it from, because it's important. And again, some of the things in my fridge are home cooked, right? Some of it is just like raw ingredients, including like red or purple cabbage. What else do we have in there? We have purple cabbage. We have vegetables, so salad stuff, spinach, peppers. We have fruits. We have all sorts of sauces. We have juices, so like vegetable juices, kombucha. We have water. But most of everything, I think, like onions, garlic, some ground beef. In the freezer, we have more vegetables, some meals that I prepared and then froze for those days where you're like just tired, don't want to do it. I spent a significant amount of money buying glass containers, and here I'll show you because I actually really love these. I forget the name. I'll grab the name of the brand too. So for my time working, I have some Bent Go salad boxes. I didn't pull them down, but you can, that brand is still around. You can go find them online. But they have a little container for your salad dressing. They have the little compartments for your toppings. And then they have a bottom container for like the salad mix. Those came in handy because on like Sundays, I would just meal prep, get my salad stuff, have it ready so that when I have to go to the office, it's ready to go. This brand, Elo, I think that's how you pronounce it. I got them from Walmart, but they are glass meal prep containers, and they were an investment, okay? And I really mean that, like an investment, but well worth it, because you can actually cook right in them. Obviously, you can't put the top in the oven because it is plastic. But the actual glass container, right? So you can put your meal stuff in it, put it in the oven. It's done, like whatever you're cooking, you know, make sure it's cooked fully through. When it's done, you can put the top on it, put it in the fridge or put it in the freezer. And they tell you how to take care of it, right? Like to preheat the oven before you use it, avoid sudden temperature changes, etc. This is what I mean when I say, like, really decide where your life is so that you can invest in what matters most. So the same $120 that I would have used to get a mani-pedi, because these prices at these nail salons are out of this world. I remember when you could go to the nail salon, you get a full set of acrylic nails for $25. You can get your toes done for $15, $20. These jokers these days are talking about $120 for that. And I'm like, oh, no. I'll go buy my nail polish and everything, do it at home. Like, something's really going on, and it's a huge disconnect. And then when you start talking about the money that leaves your community, again, I personally was no longer comfortable with spending that type of money where it's like every 2 weeks when I go to get them redone, I literally have nothing to show for it. So I said, you know what, let me turn my life around. Let me go ahead and invest $125 in buying enough of these containers. So it's 2 different styles. This one has the sectioned side. This one is just like a whole full thing. And I've already put them to use. So the few meals that I have prepared prepared, they are in containers like this, right? So from your soups and everything, they tell you just don't fill it up all the way to the top. Leave some room in it, right? To allow for expansion. And they're top rack dishwasher safe. I hand wash them, but that's just me, right? You can do what you want. But again, I looked at how I can make my life easier, how I can make my life flow. What does that look like, right? So for the season where it's like meal prepping, meal planning was important, that's what I had to do. That was the trade-off that I was willing to make. Where I'm at right now, it's time for me to get more strategic partners on board so that the business can actually be profitable and we can actually bring programs to people outside of just content creation on YouTube. And so as it stands right now, I just cook as I am ready to go. I don't have meals prepared because after a while, after doing that for several weeks, I ran into recipe fatigue where it's like, oh, I don't know what I want to eat. I don't know what I have a taste for. I don't know. And then I would also try to make sure that I wasn't having the same dish more than 2 days in a row because then you get tired of it. So at some point I was like, you know what? I think my next step will be to actually get a private chef or invest in a meal delivery service where the meals are already prepared. I'm tired of cooking. I've been cooking since I was 15 years old. I will be 40 in a few weeks. I am tired of cooking. I'm ready for somebody to just say, here's your meal, madam. And that's why I really like being on vacation. That's why I really like going to places that actually cater to me, because I'm like, yes, one less thing, or even have a fixed menu, because I'm like, okay, yes, thank you for making it easy for me to make a decision. Because if I have to think of all these raw ingredients and what to make from them, remember I talked about mental load earlier in the video. All of that's real. And again, as a woman, when I'm going through my list of all the things that I still want to accomplish today, knowing that I'll probably only get to 2 or 3, it's a very ambitious list of everything that you have to do. So by the time you have gotten yourself dressed and presentable for the world, you still have this to do, that to do, this to do, that to do. So for me to be able to deep breathe, it took me actually getting to know myself, right? Actually reclaiming that inner child who was still there, but just didn't have the opportunity to express what she wanted to experience. On Monday's video, I talked to you all a little bit about how making one of the hair recipes felt really fun for me, because it was like, oh, hypothesis. I think by doing XYZ, I can restore the melanin in my hair, right? So now I'm taking myself through a consistent schedule of applying that recipe to my hair, seeing and witnessing and observing how my hair reacts, and if I actually hit that goal that I thought, right? At the end of that finite amount of time, I'll have an answer, yay or nay. Did it do what I thought it would do, or did it not? Again, sometimes we get a little flustered about what is possible for us to do, especially as women. And I speak confidently in saying that because yesterday I attended an event to celebrate women businesses in the state of Maryland, and it was a full house of entrepreneurs who are in business or starting their business. And the way that we had to be poured into is so different than how men are poured into. And how I know that is because I've also seen how men are poured into, right? Like they are able to just try something and be like, oh, dude, and their ability to bounce back after a failure is also different than how a woman does. Like we tend to internalize it, like it becomes so much of our identity. And while, again, the wellness aspect of who we are as people, keeping those failures in our body, keeping just ruminating on certain things that didn't work, we have to be able to pivot and do something differently. So, like I said, for me, it was acknowledging the cognitive load of being a full-time employee, still being an artist, a living, breathing artist who, again, has all these tools at her disposal, but needs to be able to hire and delegate, needs to be able to sustain so many different things. I've tried so much over my career because I've always had to make things work, right? So there were times where I'm an independent contractor, and then years later, learning, oh, it was easier for them to make you an independent contractor because they didn't want the load of like making you an FTE because XYZ and the taxes for blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of lessons that I've learned by not knowing that I could negotiate certain rates, negotiate certain terms, where it's like, again, as an artist who also has to have a business mindset in order for her to survive in a marketplace that rewards getting things the cheapest so that you can pocket the rest, and saying, hey, I don't think that that's an equitable way to live, because everybody's trying to live. And so as the person that's creating the intellectual property, doesn't it make sense for me to get the larger portion than, you know, the middleman who, yes, they're providing some sort of infrastructure, but how is that more important than what I'm creating when you need this thing in order to do XYZ, to get your product to who you want to get it to? And so I think, again, the more that we are in support of unions, I think the better. Because again, just to see where America is in 2025, there was never this much homelessness when I was growing up. There was never this much people needing support. I read yesterday that the head of GoFundMe went on record to say that people are now doing GoFundMes for groceries. People are creating GoFundMe campaigns to buy groceries in America in 2025. People are having to create GoFundMes for food, a basic human right. So again, when we start talking about who eats, who doesn't eat, who lives, who doesn't live, all of these things matter, because I come from a family and a community that never saw people go without, right? That's the Washington, D.C. that I grew up in. That's the Prince George's County that I grew up in. And so when I think about leaving and relocating, I look for, how do they treat the people that are already there, right? Even as a business owner, knowing that I could pack up my LLC, I can pack up production, I can go anywhere that will have me, who sees the business plan, sees the jobs and the tax money that I can generate for their municipality, and they would welcome me with open arms. But where do I want to be? Like, who am I as a business owner, right? Like, am I intending to do more harm than good? Am I intending to leave a positive impact on myself, future employees, their families, things of that nature? That's a very tall order. And again, when I look at how iterative an industry like technology is, I remember, I'll give you a great example of how long I've been working on websites, if you will. When my granddad and my grandmom had their transportation company, I was at their house in DC after school, and I remember creating a Yahoo Geo site for their transportation company. I was in middle school, but they needed to be able to have something that showed that they existed online, because that's when people were starting to be ushered to the internet. And like I said, I'll be 40 in 2 weeks. So from doing that, where most of their business came through word of mouth, they didn't have all these regulations and things that we have now as business owners. Because I asked my grandma that some months ago before she left, and she was like, we didn't have all that. It was so much easier for them to get up and do business. And my granddad's, he was the main driver, so he had a bus, and he had certain routes that he would do. So he would take kids to private school, and then he also would do, when the tennis tournament came to the DC area, he would drive people to that, in addition to private trips, group trips, things of that nature. And it was a fruitful experience for him because he was an affable, charismatic gentleman, and so business was natural for him. My grandma, like I said, she is a stoic woman, played much more of the background, but their business was successful when it was existing. They had happy repeat customers. And again, just when someone talked to my granddad about, oh, you need a presence on the internet or whatever, and he's like, grandbabe, can you help me? And I'm like, okay. And again, geosites. And I remember picking like a little bus icon and put on the page. My, how times have changed. And so here I sit, knowing that there has been so much change just even in the past 20, 30 years of technology, right? I've been through the wave of content marketing, the wave of SEO, landing pages, conversions. I've done so much. Oh, let's actually do some user testing. Let's see how this UX looks on this application, app design, this, that. Okay, let's do some QA testing. I've had a remarkable career to see how humans think, how we shop, how we live. And again, by the time I bring myself to wellness, it's from a place of like, this really helped me. I can put my stamp on this because it helped, right? It helped me progress. And I can also put my stamp of this on this because it also helped my doctor, who again is in the traditional medicine lane, right? Or this is something that us herbalists are talking about because XYZ. There's still, again, the plants have been evolving right alongside humans for all of time. And that's why, it's sad to see that the government shutdown kind of prevents certain access to certain museums, because the documented human history cannot be altered because a small group for a finite amount of time doesn't like the truth that it tells, right? We cannot continue to allow tyranny to kill us, right? Like I said, just when I was working with former clients, right, and we're going over the strategic brief. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? How, by what date? What are we looking for? How's the needle moving? What is the sentiment? Do we need to do a scorecard? Do we need to measure this? Do we need to do our own test research? What do we need to do? Do we need to hire an external agency? You see just how many humans have a hand in something before it goes to market, right? You see how much money it actually takes to get in front of the eyes and ears of people who are most likely to convert, right? But just because someone converts doesn't mean that they're going to be a repeat customer, right? You still, once you get someone in the door, you need to be able to see, okay, am I serving your need? You need to constantly talk to them and kind of what keeps them there? What else do they want from you? And I think, again, when you sit down, this is why I will never, ever, ever, ever tell someone to be an entrepreneur, or, even in the wave of like the mass firings that the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area are experiencing, still wouldn't rush to tell those people who are now unemployed to just start businesses, because it's grueling. It is absolutely grueling, and it's not free. You have annual filing fees. You have to do an annual report. You are still accountable to someone, right? When I see influencers say, oh, just try to shun people who work traditional 9 to 5s. It's like, you may not have a boss, but your client is your boss, right? Like, if that client decides that they don't have budget for you anymore, you have to find another client who has budget that has a service that you want. So I personally, I take my time to find the right fit of client and business alignment, because I also used to be a freelancer where I know what it was like to just have to take on any client because you have bills to pay. And I know how insufferable some clients can be, especially clients that don't really have the budget, right? I tell people you need at least 18 months to run a real campaign, right? Because you need to be able to test and iterate once you actually establish a baseline. So if you can't spend 20 grand a month just on your ad spend, that's not even considering the money that you need to actually create the creative. Try something, try small and scale, right? Because even if you need capital, and whether it's grants or loans, you still have to talk to people. You still have to get them bought into your vision. We're in a completely different landscape than what business was down the street, right? 20, 40 years ago, where it could just be, we're doing business because we gave each other our word. The landscape is different, and the goalpost always changes when you have an influx of viable competitors in a certain segment. So again, my education and my personal experience puts me at a different classification of thought leadership and subject matter expertise, right? And so I intentionally try to refrain from doing certain things that certain thought leaders would do, because again, I've vetted and talked to so many different career coaches who told me, oh, you need to get on a speaker's junket, you need to increase your rates, you need to be charging $25,000 for an appearance, and da-da-da-da-da. I used to ghostwrite for CEOs of companies, right? Like, as a freelancer. I know the power of my words. I know the power of my writing. And again, trying to leverage that to, again, establish my authority in the landscape, to give something without expecting anything in return. When I started looking at some of the health outcomes, once I was working in healthcare communications, and I started seeing not only the maternal and infant child mortality rates and what that looked like in the Black community, I started seeing the life expectancy rates of Black men and how their stretch of life, the stretch of their dash, the stretch of their health outcomes was only putting them at about 60 to 73 years old is the life expectancy for Black men in America. And it's deeply concerning, right? Because it means that, like, hey, whatever has been done and the conditions with which this group of people are expected to persist, it's not helping. Even with all of that, we're still not getting longer life expectancy, right? Me watching documentaries, like I said, documentary filmmaking is one of my favorite genres of film. And I love hearing diverse voices, right? By the time I started watching films about the Blue Zone diets and how people in Asia eat and people who live to 100 and longer, and then I start hearing from more centenarians and not only what is their diet, right? Because again, certain people in certain climates, their bodies are accustomed to certain foods, so they can tolerate it a little differently. you start to look at some of those health markers, and it's like, okay, what else is informing how they're able to live? It's like, oh, because they don't have stress, they go outside, they move their bodies, they do this and that. And it's like, oh, okay, so we have to do more, right? You always have to be moving, right? Like, so again, your fresh air, your water, your movement, your stretching. When I looked at how I wanted to approach wellness, I wanted to do it from a place of like sustainable. You can do it from where you are right now, right? So like, even with me sharing that about fresh air, you could pause this video, go for a walk, do some deep breathing outside, do some stretching, do a couple jumping jacks or something like that. Just get your heart rate going. And there's no shortage of YouTube content creators who've been generous enough to put different types of exercise programs on the internet, right? Some of them charge monthly membership. It's like $4.99, $5.99. When I looked at the power of YouTube, I said, I'm going to go ahead and allow my Squarespace to go bye-bye, right? Because again, once you start having a whole bunch of different initiatives, I've gone through so many different web hosting companies. I've gone through so many different CMS platforms that I've used for myself and also for my clients. And you see these recurring charges month after month. You say, what is going on? Again, I should go where the people are and allow them to come to me there rather than having this extraneous thing, right? And telling them to come there, but then also come over here because I have web hosting. Because again, when you start talking about the technical aspects of video production, baby, where are we storing those files, right? When my phone gives me a prompt that says, hey, we're out of storage, I have to upload that video somewhere, right? Am I uploading it to Dropbox? Am I uploading it to some other large capacity video repository and then linking it to YouTube? Like, what YouTube also has expenses, right? So like when they're hosting these videos, right? Like, I would hate to see what their operating costs are for storage, to be honest. And I mean physical storage, the warehouses that they use, but then also the video storage, because again, those are some of the things that you as a business owner take into consideration when you look at your monthly expenditures, right? So when I'm looking at, I'm on this platform, but then I'm going to hit a limit, and so they're going to tell me to buy more there, but I'm also over here, and I'm also over here, and I'm also over here, and I said, no. Again, scale back, focus on one thing at a time. There's so much information out there. You name it, you can find it. Just be very intentional about how long you're waiting to see results and how much you're spending on said thing, right? Because at some point you have to say, all right, there are certain things that nature gives us for free, and then there are certain things that I'll have to pay for. What am I willing to pay for, right? Just as a human, what am I willing to pay for, right? For some people that have children, they have decided that, okay, going off grid and gardening is what's best for our family, and putting solar panels up. That's best for us because we have a family of 5 and we need to keep our expenses down. And that works for them. You can learn from these people, but it doesn't mean you need to idolize them. I think that's the word. It doesn't mean that you have to follow their formula. I think that's the beauty of being an independent person, an independent thinker, is that you can find what works for you. I've seen a couple of, again, people who I will call content creators, who give you the perspective of like, here's how you can live your rich life now. Here's how you can do X, Y, Z. And it's like, yeah, but you also still have to buy their book. You still have to buy their time, and you still have to implement that stuff into your life. And if you want them to help you with said thing, you have to rent their time. So when, again, I think about the mental load of carrying all this information and things around, and you say, how do you get to impact, right? Because everybody's going to do what they want to do. Like I said, being on YouTube makes the most sense, right? There's no shortage. I'm sure one day soon when I'm doing my grocery shopping, I'll probably video from there so I can show you one of my favorite markets that I go to, because I love the small business network so very much. Scale past necessity really concerns me, because there is something finite about the land that we are on, especially if we don't have enough people who are, again, planting trees to offset the trees that have been cut down to make room for commercial development, right? We need oxygen to breathe. We need more people planting trees, and we need those trees to grow and mature, right? We have tons of native people who have the practices of reforesting. I don't see those people getting the platforms and the dollars to share that wisdom and knowledge so that we can actually give the earth a fighting chance, right? I think that was one of the good things that came from the lockdown, was that we were forced inside, and we were forced to make do with what we had, right? So even when businesses say, oh, you have to return to office, they made record-breaking profits during COVID. So what besides control do you need us to be in the office for? Like, be for real, you know? And so again, I think when I look at a lot of how humans treat humans, all of that plays into wellness, right? There's corporate wellness programs that look at the overall functioning of a human and their ability to have productive outputs, their ability to drive revenue, right? There's certain departments that have always had to prove their worthiness, which is why they are some of the first to be let go, right? Because they're not directly tied to a business outcome. And some of them get a pass, right? Because it's like, oh, but we've always existed. It's like, but what does it look like to have a workforce turnover, right? Like, there are certain markers that, again, for me, when I decided to start an LLC, started as my ability to be paid as a contractor. But then when I had to start setting my rates, I had to upskill and learn certain things. When I had to pull in subcontractors, I had to look at certain things. When it came time to pay those subcontractors and look at my profit and my revenue, I had to eat certain costs because, oh, I didn't know about XYZ. There's a lot of experience where it's like, I'm grateful that I went through that. So again, by the time you look at the opportunity to sit in a seat and say, oh, I can hire a team that I want, I can live how I want, I can be a positive contributing member of society, how do I want to show up? Those are some of the things that fuel me. And also what fuels me are high quality ingredients of foodstuffs that are as close to how they came out the earth as possible. And I'm grateful that I can actually be at this place in time, because I know what it was like to literally be living on $25 a week in groceries, right? And so when I look at my portfolio that has changed so much, like from physical to digital, because so much has been lost in the transition of time. I've worked on hundreds of projects over the course of my career. Like, a lot. I have been, and this is why I said, like, for Black women, we have to really decide the quality of life that we want, because we know Black women are the workhorse of most industries, right? I I had a period where I was applying for jobs and stuff that I would literally cry looking at my resume at how overworked I was and underpaid I was, right? And being like, wow, I wish I would have had a career sponsor. I wish I would have had a mentor that actually looked out for me, because I didn't know. And so even that, like how people who are your supervisors or team leads, like it's so easy to say, oh, you should do this. It's like, but if you didn't know, you didn't know. So at what point do we put the onus on people who are people managers to have certain skills so that they are actually invested in the careers of their people? Because maybe those people would stay and work at those companies longer. You know, I think we allow so much exploitation to be the norm, which is why I posted those two book recommendations: The Body Keeps the Score and Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Because when you understand that most people still denigrate the human body, still see Black people as deserving of less than, when you see that the majority of corporate America and most industries are white people in leadership and Black people as rank and file employees, you can start to begin to understand the psychological thought process and the strategy of getting the most out of people while paying them the less. That's exploitation. And again, just me being empowered with saying, hey, you can spend $300 to form your own business, but if you want to actually bring people on board to work with you, you know what it felt like to be exploited at the hands of people who looked like you and also the hands of people that didn't look like you. How do you want to show up in the community? How do you want to show up, right? Because it seems very disingenuous to say, oh, I care about you as a person. How are you doing? What can I do to make your life easier? At least while at work, when it's like, most people need money, right? Most people need money and more of it. So when I start talking about equitable pay, when I start talking about unionizing, when I start talking about all those things, like the quality of life for most people would improve with more money. And there's no way to get around that. And again, I appreciate that there are so many different tools and tricks that can be used to bring more flow into one's life. But at the end of the day, money is 24/7. Money is constantly generated. Money is constantly circulated in this economy for everyone. We need more money in the hands of people who want to put more money in the hands of more people, right? Because again, the better health outcomes we have for everyone, the more likely I am to be able to get my stuff on time from my suppliers. The more apt Jacinia is to come to work, right? Because she had enough money to not only get up, get herself and her children clothed, but also to put gas in her car and make it to work on time. You know, it saddens me when I see content creators share their stories about how they're working 2 and 3 jobs and they live in their car. They work 2 and 3 jobs, but they didn't have enough money to buy their lunch. And I think the answer isn't more jobs, it's more money, right? You have a finite amount of time. Like the human body can only take so much. So then when you usher in this era of AI and you have so many influential voices and names and brands that have already adapted their business models to include AI, and you see the labor force that's being completely gutted to support AI, you say, okay, but what's going to happen to all those people? Because they're real people, right? How many foreclosures are we going to see? Are there enough homeless shelters to house the unhoused, right? Daycare was already a crippling expense for so many people. So not only do you not have the time to be a part of your children's lives and during their milestones, you don't have enough money to afford to send them to said daycare. And even the daycare systems, right? When you are running late because you had to do a little bit more work at work and you're picking up your child late, so now you're incurring an expense because you hit the late mark. Where's that money coming from? so much is on the shoulders of women, and it's like there's so much expected out of women, and I can only speak as a woman who has lots of women around her. The community isn't really there, right? The male participation and the expectation of fathers in their children's lives outside of just being a provider, if you will. The same demands that are put on women are not put on men to show up in the workplace as well as in the home and contribute as a functioning adult. The demands are lopsided. And that's also one of the dangers of like just taking the wellness bit at face value, because there are still so many people who are suffering behind the scenes because their basic needs aren't being met. And so, yeah, I can give you an apple. I can give you a piece of fruit. I can give you a glass of water. I can give you a cup of tea. We can bring masseuse into the office and have a spa day in the office. And it's good for that moment, right? It feels wonderful, right? We can have meditation sessions during lunch break. I've been at progressive companies that have offered so many wonderful things. And even when one of my former employers was a member at WeWork, so there were certain perks that we got with being WeWork members, right? You see how so many companies try to solve some of the stop gaps of what humans need to actually show up fully. But again, when I look at the division of labor, when I look at the pay discrepancies, when I look at how people view women as subservient anyway, and again, come back to the mental load, you can understand why people feel like if I just buy this supplement, I'll feel better. If I just buy this dress, I'll feel better. If I just buy this thing, I'll feel better. But it doesn't work because it's not sustainable. It's not a real solution. It's a Band-Aid to a much larger, insidious issue that all of us have bought into and made it okay, that as long as it's not me, I don't have to care about it. As long as it doesn't affect my pockets, I don't have to care about it. So again, when some of the research that I've done and looked at, it said humans would need to make at least $66 or $65 an hour to be able to buy a house like what we saw in the 70s. And you see that the federal minimum wage is still at $7.50. I haven't looked to see which state currently has the highest minimum wage. You can see like why people run to industries like tech that promise higher wages, but yeah, the demand on your body and your mind may be a lot harder, right? You may be expected to be available 24/7. You might have a little bit more gray area about working hours, even though there are federal laws that talk about how much you can be worked. There's so many different ways to get around being good humans that the law allows. And again, most of us are okay with it if we're on the positive receiving end of it. So again, I'm staying in my lane, focusing on my own wellness so that I can be the best possible me that shows up, not only for myself and my strategic partners, but also my family and community. I have looked at and explored where I want to permanently set up shop for my business, because even when I talk about the state of Maryland, yeah, I've been in this region for most of my life. Doesn't mean that I need to stay here. I've priced out the strategy of moving to a different state and even moving my company to a different company. I still don't want to treat those people unkindly. I still want them to be able to have a good living, you know? That stuff is important to me. And so I think when I look at the new wave of leadership, that's what I'm looking at. I appreciate all the fun trinkets that I've been able to collect over the years of working with fun partners, and again, just being able to think outside the box about solutions to real issues. Worked on some really fascinating things, some of which I can't talk about because, again, signed NDAs because we were using proprietary software or information. But there's so much that's possible. So I am not going to let humans off the hook when it comes to fair wages, fair housing, and again, just doing right by the planet Earth. Because if this Earth goes, we go. If we don't have fresh air, we're dead. If we don't have fresh water, we're out of here. So we all need to walk a little more lightly. I don't hate that, I think, again, just some of the ways that people try to make it seem like you hate billionaires or you hate people. And I'm like, I've seen so much happen in my life where, again, I don't have the energy to hate anyone. What I do have the energy to do is speak truth to the fact that policy change can wipe out any issues we think we have with billionaires. Policy change can wipe out unregulated housing markets, right? Policy can make sure that African Americans get reparations. We can start with policy, right? I'm not going to sit up here and hold one person accountable for having the money to hire the best lawyer to understand how to optimize the tax code to work in their best interest, when if it came down to you and you could actually leverage the tax code to work for yourself and your family and your business interests, you would probably do the same thing. And the only way that you could prove to me otherwise is if you got those same level of resources and the actions you would take. Talk is so cheap, y'all. And again, I say this as someone who's been working since she was 15. I've come into a lot of industries, I've come into a lot of companies and been the black sheep. I've been looked over for promotions. I've trained my replacement. Like I said, I've ghostwritten for CEOs of companies. I've written speeches, right? I've had to stand up against some very arduous opponents throughout my career, and I'm still standing. And the truth is still the truth. Everybody's going to do what's best for them, but when I look at companies that, again, I become a patron to, I look at the ethos of the company and also the character of the leadership. How do your rank and file employees feel about you, right? I would encourage, literally, and I laugh about this because when I think about, again, what it was like to be an employee, to be so nervous about going into some of these companies, right? They tell you a good game, they get the right people to answer the questions in a way that feels good and genuine, and you get there and it's a shit show behind the scenes. And you're like, this is not the company that y'all sold me on, right? And then again, it's like, how soon before you pivot out? Meanwhile, you've put in weeks of researching into this company, like you've become invested in joining this team, only to find out you were sold a bill of goods that's a complete difference once you actually get in there. And so I think, again, sure, it's an employer's market out here, but I would actually start encouraging people to ask questions about exit interviews. Why did this person leave? What's the role open for, right? What keeps you here? Most people are just working in jobs for a check. And so again, when I look at what is possible, it's like I want to be able to incentivize my strategic partners, my employees, whoever. I would want people to actually be invested in the company's success. And you do that by giving them the best of the best so that they don't want to go anywhere else. That's what I would do. So I think it's open season, it's harvest season for so many people. Like, don't allow the shiny things to blind you to the reality that you're going to have to do it, because day in and day out, just like you have to wake up and get yourself ready as a human before you even get yourself together as a worker, you're going to be expected to show up with your A game, right? Because that's what they hired you for. So how does the back blow fall on the people around you in order for you to have your A game? There's a lot that I had to modify. So let me see my nails. I just put my top coat on. Isn't it gorgeous? This color that I'm using, OPI. It's called My Paprika is Hotter Than Yours. I love the names that these nail polish companies come up with, by the way. So again, when I buy stuff, I look at all of that and I say, wow, that person has an amazing job, because that is so fun. Like, I love puns, all those little things. And I know it's probably a copywriter or a marketer that helped inform that. I try my best to be fair to the creative industry because I am a creative. Like I said, I've been freelance most of my career and full-time for a small percentage of it. And there's so much magic that happens in those brainstorming sessions where it's like, okay, we have to solve this thing. How are we going to do it? And I loved it. So again, I try my best to be mindful of the people that I let tell me what's possible, because I've seen the impossible happen. So again, that's the power of a network. Who's in your network? What do they know? What can they bring? Again, you have to find how to optimize your life, what works best for you. For me, it's not constantly having to go to all these different companies, all these different places to support myself. It's like, let me bring all of that in-house so that, again, when I decide, oh, actually, I don't feel like preparing myself a meal, I know where I can go to get a meal. I know who I can call, right? And then eventually get to a place where, like, I can hire a chef. Because, again, the trade-off, my time is finite. Again, when you come to wellness, you can buy all the things. You still have to use it. You still have to implement it day after day. Ask how many people, especially around January, New Year's resolutions, how many people buy gym outfits, gym equipment, all this stuff to get in shape every year. Every year we see it and we do it. We participate in it. And then by February, they've stopped because it's not sustainable. It's a marketing push. You have to figure out how to make it work for yourself. And after a while, like I said, I've spent thousands of dollars just on improving myself, improving my environment, investing in other people, right? Supporting other people, whether it's through GoFundMes. There's a lot where wellness can cover and should cover. That also includes, like, we have to have a real conversation about fair wage and exploitation. Because again, when I'm looking at the industry and I'm seeing the services that wellness practitioners are offering, the people who need it most can't afford what you're offering at that place and price. There's still a lot of classism in wellness, right? And so that's why I said there's a lot of like that cotton candy wellness where it's like, this is just for you to feel good, but these are like real healing modalities that should be accessible to people who could benefit most from it, but don't know that it exists in a format that they can actually leverage. So we're at the hour, 30-minute mark. Been rambling. I've showed you a couple of my favorite products. I got my nails done. And I can check filming off my list, off my to-do list. So I bid you adieu, wish you a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.